gears now to our internet freedoms in the U.S. and also around the world. Now, we all remember a few months ago when some members of Congress tried to pass the Stop Online Piracy Act and the Protect IP Act, SOPA and PIPA, we call them. Websites like Wikipedia and thousands of others staged protests and blackouts, and soon enough people were paying so much attention that those two pieces of legislation were actually voted down. Well, it turns out SOPA's evil twin brother is back, and his name is the Intellectual Property Attaché Act. I want you to take a look at this is wording from the two bills. Can you tell which is which? It's really hard because both talk about advancing intellectual property rights and preventing infringement. But the new one calls for the creation of a class of political officers who will see to it that all U.S. trade negotiations and discussions advance SOPA-like provisions abroad. That will make it easier at a later date to simply get the U.S. to comply. Now, this bill, thanks to Texas Republican Congressman Lamar Smith, is simply SOPA 2.0. Earlier, I was joined by Aaron Swartz, founder and executive director of Demand Progress, and I asked him about some of the biggest concerns in this new legislation. Take a listen.
Well, it's part of a larger process of what the U.S. does, which is take the most extreme, most maximalist interpretation of copyright law, and if they can't get it passed in the United States, go and try and get it passed in other countries. So this would actually provide more funding for this work, where they go around to other countries, try and get them to change their laws to be more extreme, and then, of course, they come back home and say, oh, well, we have to compete with these other countries. We have to make our laws more extreme, too. So it's a way of policy laundering, of getting other countries to pass laws they can't pass here at home. So
in terms of these attachés or these officials, you say they would go to other countries and try to persuade leaders there. I mean, what would be their actual job when they do travel to these other countries? How would they convince them?
I mean, they use the economic and military might of the United States. So we've seen in some of the WikiLeaks cables some details have come out about this, where they say, look, you know, we're going to cut you out of U.S. trade deals. We'll cut you out of U.S. military support. We'll, you know, they use all the pressure that the United States has to force these other countries to adopt policies that their own citizens don't want.
And, you know, we should mention this is not just going on, this sort of laundering, as you say, here in the U.S. We saw just last week the European Parliament vote to reject ACTA, and they seem to be sort of trying this backdoor approach as well. The European Union plans to use the Canada-EU trade agreement to implement these ACTA provisions. Talk a little bit about what's going on with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's this interesting thing. You see it in the U.S. Constitution, and you see it in the EU as well, where treaties with other countries don't have to go through quite the same scrutiny as the normal process of passing a law. So if there's something that gets rejected by the Congress in the United States, what they'll often try and do is sneak it into a treaty with another country and say, oh, well, you know, we're not voting on it anymore. It was just part of a treaty, and now we have to abide by it. And so we're seeing the EUs do the same thing, where ACTA, a clear vote on this question, was voted down enormously, you know, no chance of coming back. But now they're going to try and sneak it into a much larger trade agreement and say, look, to keep trading with these other countries, we need to sign on to exactly the same provisions.
I guess I'm curious, I mean, what are these lawmakers, Lamar Smith of Texas, for example, who was also involved in the original SOPA, what do they have to gain? I mean, why are they doing this?
Well, you know, the fact is, if you look at someone like Lamar Smith, Hollywood provides an enormous amount of their funding. You know, to run political campaigns, especially in the United States these days, is extremely expensive. And Hollywood not only has a lot of money, but they also have a lot of experience bankrolling political campaigns. They're very good at throwing fundraisers. They have all these PACs set up to funnel money. They know how to get money into Washington. And so a lot of these members of Congress have become dependent on it. And when SOPA died, that was kind of a big blow. Hollywood was really upset. They thought maybe, you know, we're not going to keep giving money to politicians anymore. And so they've demanded more and more extreme things in order to try and get politicians to win Hollywood's favor back.
Yeah, I mean, Hollywood, the recording industry, all these organizations, I mean, what is it that they are most concerned about? And why are they spending millions of dollars in lobbying money to try to get this legislation passed?
Well, you know, the fact is, just from a long-term perspective, it's pretty clear what the internet does is it disintermediates, right? It takes these things that used to cost money, like printing books or making copies of DVDs, and makes them essentially free. You know, it's just as easy to download a book as it is to share any other kind of file. There's no reason for a separate publishing company to be there to print copies of books. And the same is true of the Hollywood studios. You know, you can put a movie up on YouTube now. There's no reason to go through a studio and have this intermediary between you, the creator of the movie, and the people watching it. And so that puts Hollywood in incredible danger from the internet. Not because authors won't be able to make movies anymore, but because these middlemen won't be able to take a cut. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to find a way to crack down on the internet, to control it, to get rid of these free-flowing sites where anyone can post videos and make it more of a thing where you have to get approved, where you have to give them their cut, where they can continue to put themselves between the creators and the people watching the movie so that they can continue making the profits that they've made.
Aaron, let's break down this new Intellectual Property Attaché Act. Clearly, you can't just sneak stuff in Congress. You can certainly try. It's why we always try to stay, on top of, especially these kinds of stories, these kind of laws being put out there. How do you see this moving forward? I mean, how does, Congressman Lamar Smith, how does he get people to sign on, that voted against this last time?
Well, that's what's so interesting about this particular bill is that after they learned the mistakes from SOPA, they said, look, we're not going to try and sneak anything through again. We'll have it all be part of a debate, part of a larger discussion. Don't worry, everybody relax. We learned our lesson. And so what does Lamar Smith do? He waits a reasonable period, waits till everybody calms down, till people are less afraid of SOPA. And then does he hold the discussion? Does he bring people together? Does he even release the bill? No, he hasn't even put the bill online yet for people to read. He announces there's going to be a vote scheduled on it before anyone has even gotten a chance to read the bill. I mean, it's, that's what I mean by sneaking this bill through. There's not even going to be a hearing about whether it's a good idea or not. They're going straight to the vote the same day that he's going to release the text of the bill. And so, basically he's just asking people to vote on this thing knowing that Hollywood likes it without knowing what's in it. That's the kind of dangerous and irresponsible tactic that got Congress rightly criticized under SOPA. And they think, well, if we change the name, if we, rush it faster this time, if we just, try a little bit harder, maybe we can sneak it through. And it's up to us to make sure they can.
Well, it's so interesting, Aaron. I don't know if, the final bill, but I have a copy right here of, as it is now. And it's so interesting because in the first line, what it says is to create a level playing field for American innovators and American job creation. It's just crazy to me how, the wording can really mislead what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, luckily some of our allies have been able to get out a draft copy of the bill because, again, it hasn't been formally published yet. It's not on the official Congress website. So luckily we've been able to sneak out a draft. And you read this draft, again, they play these games with the names like, I think they had one called the E-Parasites Act and so on. They had all these different names for SOPA to try and confuse people to say, oh, no, it's a different bill. It has a totally different name. It's not at all what you were worried about. And again, that's what they're doing here. They put these innocuous titles on it, these innocuous descriptions. But the fact is that, if you read the bill, you see what it's trying to do. There's nothing in this bill. One of the most fascinating things about it, there's nothing about limits to copyright law. The job of these people would be all about strengthening copyright law and increasing it and making it more powerful. Now, the fact is, the American Constitution requires there be limits to it. The First Amendment says you need to have fair use, you need to have protection for parody and political speech. These attachés would be forced to ignore that. They would not be allowed to let other countries have the same kind of exemptions we have here. They would have to push for the most maximalist interpretation possible. It's outrageous.
All right, Aaron Swartz, founder and executive director of Demand Progress. As always, thanks for being on the show.